We're headed over to Cedartown, Georgia to pay our respects to Jan Hooks, former Saturday Night Live alumni. She's also co-starred in Designing Women and Third Rock from the Sun. I'd love for you to join me, so let's go. We've just come into the city limits of Cedartown, and right here on the left is Northview Cemetery. We're going to be turning in here, and you'll recognize it because it's a huge cemetery, but it's also, the entrance has these two large stone pillars. Then we go up here to the 4th drive on the left. And there's a sign that says BKH right there. That's where you turn. Go up here a very short distance, right before the end of the drive. And you'll see there's a kind of a street sign here on your right. Just pull off right there. And now we're at our destination. So after you park, we'll walk right out here. And this is where you'll find the final resting place of Janet Vivian Hooks. You probably know her best is Jan Hooks. Jan was born April 23rd, 1957, and she lived most of her younger years and teenage years in Decatur, Georgia. Now that's where she attended elementary school and high school, but in 1974 her father, who was a Sears employee, was transferred to Fort Myers, Florida. That's where she attended the remainder of her high school career, and she went on to college at Edison State College. But she didn't finish college because she wanted to pursue a career in acting. And she began her career in acting in Los Angeles with a comedy troupe called The Groundlings. She still had ties in Atlanta, though. She performed in a nightclub act called The Wits End Players. Still here in Atlanta, from 1980 to 1981, she appeared on Tush. Now what that was a TV show on Channel 17. You guys know it as WTBS on your cable networks. Well, back in those days, Bill Tush, who was kind of a local, local anchor, local star on WTBS, Channel 17, he had a show, and it was kind of a comedy skit show. For a couple of years, Jan was on that. Also, about that same time in the early 80s, she was on an HBO comedy series. It was called Not Necessarily the News. She also made guest appearances on Comedy Break with Mac and Jamie. That was also kind of in the mid-1980s. And she had a chance to join Saturday Night Live in 1985, but the show's producers passed her over in favor of Joan Cusack. Now the 85 and 86 series was deemed kind of a ratings disaster, and the show was kind of scheduled for cancellation, but they got Lorne Michaels back, and he kind of put together a whole new comedy team there with Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, and Jan Hooks. So once joining the cast of Saturday Night Live, she was able to create some of her own characters. One of the most popular was Candy Sweeney, the Sweeney sisters. She was also very good at imitation. She was able to do everybody from Hillary Clinton to Betty Davis and Margaret. Probably the one I remember the most was when she would do Tammy Faye Baker. And she stayed with Saturday Night Live up until 1991, and she would make guest appearances all the way up until 1994. But for her, and being on live TV every week was kind of a stress. And she even commented at one time that before each show, she would kind of sit in a corner and she would be kind of praying to herself that all of her skits would be removed. She had terrible stage fright. So when she left Saturday Night Live, a lot of the stars that were on at that time, and even those after her, thought that she would have become a bigger star. But because of her anxiety and her stage fright, she never really pursued a lot of work. She did appear in several movies. She was in Jimmy Glick and La La World. She did some guest appearances on The Simpsons and Futurama. She even appeared in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. She also made a cameo appearance in Batman Returns as Jen. She was the image consultant for Penguin's campaign to become mayor of Gotham City. She appeared as a regular in several TV shows, including Designing Women and Third Rock from the Sun. Sadly, at the age of 57, Jan was taken from us by throat cancer. So you may ask, why is Jan laid to rest in a small town on West Georgia, a little place called Cedartown? Well, this is where her family's laid to rest. Right next to Jan is her mom, Sarah Margaret Brannon Hooks, who passed away in 1986. The inscription on her headstone says, "Look for the good and praise it." I think that's something that we all could live by. Also buried in this cemetery is Jan's aunt and her grandmother and her grandfather. As a matter of fact, Janet Vivian Hooks was named after her grandmother, Vivian Brannon. Jan gave us all the gift of laughter. After she passed away, Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons both paid tribute to Jan. You can look it up on YouTube. You can look up Love is a Dream. That is a tribute to Jan and also Phil Hartman. It was a skit that they had performed on the 14th season of Saturday Night Live. So I'm sure you're wondering about the Paste Pacante sauce. Well, in 1985, Jan did a commercial for Paste Pacante. Jan's gravesite is just right down there, but walking up from there, found this headstone. Apparently Mr. Harpe enjoyed the game of baseball. It's also interesting on the front side. Got Stanley's Produce. Apparently Stanley Harpe had a produce store. And if you look right down here in the corner, it says "Going Home." Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's video, well, maybe check this one out. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. And until next time, the road is closed.